All right, I'm glad you're back. I hope you watched the video about library research, and I hope you started to play around and experiment a little bit with those databases. Where we left off here was the tips for the database searches. So you can pick a database, or you can do an advanced search with the and, or, and not, like I showed you. You can start to filter your results so you get things that are specifically what you want. You can start to look closely at a specific source, read the abstract, and I pointed out how to look for the keywords or the tags so that you could start searching those terms as well. Okay, so that's where we left off. And the very last thing I want to talk to you about is how to tell if you have fake news or not. So this is a big thing in the United States, whether the information we're getting is true and real or whether it's fake. So we have something called the research triangle right here. And it basically explains, you read this in your textbook as well, basically explains that there's 3 categories of sources, electronic or online sources. And when I say that, I'm talking about things like websites, documentaries, podcasts, blogs, anything electronic. So a movie, a video, a song, a podcast, that type of thing. We also typically talk about a category of print sources. Now, these are not printed really anymore. They were traditionally printed. They are still printed, but most people consume them online. So these are things like journals, the scholarly journals we talked about, magazines, newspapers, publications that the government puts out, something that would have been on paper before, but now is probably online. And of course, our third category of sources is empirical sources. So personal experience, interviews, surveys, etc. The idea of these 3 sources making a triangle is that if you find the same information in a variety of sources, so not just 2 different websites, but if you find the same information in an online source and in a real life or primary source, and if you can also find it mentioned in a magazine or a newspaper, then it's probably more reliable. So again, I'm not talking about finding 2 online sources or 2 print sources. I'm talking about finding the same information in electronic sources like a documentary, the same information in a magazine, and the same information in an interview. If you find the same fact in 3 different places, it's probably true. So 3 different types of sources. If a fact or a piece of information is found in 3 different types of sources, it's probably pretty reliable. And I like to think about that as being like my grandma, totally trustworthy, and she knows what she's talking about. If you can only find a piece of information in 2 different sources, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. It just means that you should be open to doubt. You should question it and you should think critically about it. Does it seem right? And I've compared this a little bit to like your older brother. He's probably not lying, but maybe he doesn't know everything or you don't have the whole story. If you can only find a piece of information online and nobody in real life has ever had this experience, or if you can only find information in a piece of information listed in magazines, but you can't find it in any electronic sources, then you probably need to continue researching to back up your findings and determine if that is really true. And I've compared this to your ex. If you can only find it in one place, it's probably not something that you should trust. So as you're reading through the sources that you find online, either through an internet search or an academic search, try to think about how many different places you're seeing the same information. This should help you determine credibility as much as you can. Don't forget about your homework today. You're specifically looking at the organization, the content, the organization, and the style, just like we did with our first paper. Okay, I will see you guys in class. Bye.